Welcome to the Wicked Twisted podcast that delves into the most perplexing, unsolved mysteries and scary stories revolving around the Bridgewater Triangle. I'm your host, Tori, and today we'll be unraveling the haunting case of Mary-Lou Arruda. Now, some of you may have heard me talk about this case on our YouTube channel and the Paranormal Files video of the Freetown State Forest, but I wanted to give you a deeper insight into what exactly happened to Mary-Lou and everything she endured before she met her sad and tragic end at such a young age, including the case and her killer. I have quite a few connections to her and her family, which will be covered more on our YouTube channel over time during our investigations and a special project we may release soon. But for now, here's the case of Mary-Lou Arruda. Mary-Lou Arruda was on top of the world at a young age. She was popular, she was on the cheerleading squad, and her family was beloved in their small town of Rainham. A town where everyone knew each other, no one locked their doors, and kids could play until the streetlights came on. And then all that changed when at just 15 years old, she vanished from the small town in Massachusetts in 1978. It was a disappearance that would haunt her family and the community for decades to come. On a crisp September day, 2 days after her birthday, Mary-Lou set out on her bike for a leisurely ride near her home after school. But as the hours passed and she failed to return, her family grew increasingly frantic. Police were called as her bike was discovered and returned home by another kid in the neighborhood, with the popular teen girl nowhere to be found. Searches began almost immediately, with everyone pitching in to find Mary-Lou, with no success in sight. That was until 2 months later, in November, when the family's worst fears were confirmed, as Mary-Lou's lifeless body was discovered by dirt bike riders in the Freetown State Forest. Shortly after she was found tied to a tree, an autopsy was done on Mary-Lou's body, where it was determined that her cause of death was due to asphyxiation. They had released information stating that the young girl was in a standing position, awake, but had become increasingly exhausted and fell unconscious. The weight of her head had leaned so heavily against the rope around her neck that she had suffocated till she later died in her sleep. Mary-Lou had passed away the same day she was abducted, alone in the terrifying and notorious surroundings of the Freetown State Forest. During the search for Arruda, several witnesses had come forward, reporting a bright green vehicle with black racing stripes in the area during her disappearance. The police were able to get a good enough description of the driver for a sketch to be done. They had also found a tire mark and a Benson and Hedges cigarette on the scene. On September 13th, 1978, just 3 days after Mary-Lou went missing and after the wanted poster of that sketch had gone out to the public, the Rainham Police Department got a tip and a photo of a man named James Cater, who later walked into the police station, lawyer and wife in tow, to talk to the police during an interrogation. Cater was not only a spitting image of the sketch and the man in the photo from the tipper, but also drove the same car reported by witnesses and smoked the exact same cigarettes that were found at the crime scene. Later, in examining the vehicle Cater drove, police would discover that his front tire had some wear in it, matching that of the skid mark they had found where Mary had vanished from. Now I'd like to give you some more background on Cater and what he was doing before the Mary-Lou abduction. I think it'll give you more of a sense of who he is and why this even happened in the first place. Cater was born in Brockton, Massachusetts, where he was actually on probation and was recently released from prison in 1976 for a similar crime he committed in 1968, which horrified the town of Rainham. How could this vile man be released from prison with charges brought up for attempted assault, rape, and kidnapping. Just 10 years prior, Cater had kidnapped a 13-year-old girl who was also riding her bike, where she was brought into a wooded area and tied to a tree. Luckily for his first victim, she was able to escape and survive, but had he not been released from prison for his first horrific crime, Mary-Lou would still be alive today. With the same MO, it seemed to investigators and people in the community that Cater had the tendencies and the makings of quickly becoming a serial killer had he not been caught for the second time. After his arrest, Cater had gladly taken credit for the 1968 crime he'd committed and pleaded guilty to while testifying on his own behalf, but refused to take credit for the violation and murder against Mary-Lou Arruda. Cater swore he'd been trying to restart his life and become a better person despite all the evidence against him. He'd only been out of prison for a little less than 2 years before killing Mary-Lou. In 1979, Cater was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which, infuriatingly, the Massachusetts Supreme Court overturned. He was later convicted again for the second time in 1986, which was also overturned due to unreliable witnesses. Then, in 1992, there was a third trial, which ended in a mistrial and was later fixed, and he was tried again for the final time in 1996, where he was finally sentenced permanently to life without the possibility of parole. Cater later died in 2016 in prison due to cancer, an act of karma if you ask me. It's long overdue. Beyond the courtroom drama in the case lies a deeper story here, one of resilience, perseverance, and the enduring quest for truth from not only the community of Rainham, but the Arruda family as well. I couldn't imagine sitting through several trials, watching the person who murdered someone I loved constantly not receive justice for his actions for almost 20 years. The people of Rainham and the Arruda family showed true strength while watching and enduring every single trial, not knowing if they'd ever get closure for Mary-Lou's death, getting her abductor and killer sentenced so he could spend the rest of his life rotting in prison. Thank you for tuning in to our first episode of the Wicked Twisted podcast, where every Wednesday we will dive deep into cases, scary stories, and experiences regarding the Bridgewater Triangle, giving you a bit more background on how haunted a place like this can truly be. In the meantime, subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'll see you all soon. This is your host, Tori. Stay wicked and stay twisted. Special thank you to NBC Boston, ABC News 6, and the Huffington Post for today's research.